I'm your host, Raven C. Nole, known as the Soul Physician. I'm a wife, mother, counselor, mindset plus life coach, and speaker. Hey, Jackie.
Hey, how's it going?
How are you?
I'm doing really good. Excited to be here. Honored to be a guest for your show, Raven. I'm such a
Oh,
huge fan of you, so I'm glad we get to chat today.
oh, thank you. I'm a huge fan of you too. It's going to be awesome. So, thank you so much for joining me and just agreeing to be interviewed. When I started to plan this series, I just knew I had to interview you because you work with influencers directly. And I feel like you have this dual perspective. So, you have your own perspective of influence and what that looks like. And then you have the perspective of all those that you either currently work with or you've worked with in the past. And I just thought it would be a really good perspective and conversation to have from that dual perspective.
I'm here for it. Absolutely.
So I know that you work with Black Christian influencers. That's your thing. That's your baby. That's your business. And so what motivated you to kind of get into that work and start working with influencers?
So honestly, I didn't plan on it. I was an educator before I became a CEO, and that's what I thought I would be doing my entire life. I love working with students. I love teaching. So I got the opportunity to do both in my role, and it was really great. Honestly, I enjoyed it. My time there really showed me, though, that people aren't really as into being in-person connections anymore. They really want to see people online. And so my students, even though I literally would be standing right in front of them, they would be looking right through me and looking to their social media platforms. And I'm like, I need to get to where they're at. And so I started to reach out on social media to my students, and I created a platform called Jackie the Educator. That's where that came from, because I was trying to reach my students. And in doing that, I realized that it was actually a tool to reach a much larger audience. I started to reach people that weren't my students. And that's when it kind of hit me that this is something that could be bigger. And so obviously I'm a Christian. My dad's a pastor. I've grown up in the church. I'm a minister as well. And I just really wanted to infuse the ministry and the ability to create influence and put it together. And I created BCI. Obviously, that was just something that came because I was literally writing down on a piece of paper, Black Christian influencers is my target audience. And then I was like, wait a minute, there's the name, Black Christian influencers. And that's literally how it came about. There was no special business plan, no thought out message. None of this stuff happened. Honestly, it was literally God ordaining this thing to move forward, because it blew up beyond my expectations after that.
Wow, that's amazing. Oh my goodness. Okay, so with like that kind of going into this field with influencers, was there anything that you didn't expect kind of working with this career field, or things that were kind of like out of the ordinary or kind of caught you off guard or anything like that?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't expect, as a person I consider myself a normal person. I wasn't like in the limelight or being known for anything. I was just living my life. I didn't expect, though, that people of influence had so many layers of insecurities, issues, trauma, and just in their own selves problems. Because when you see them publicly, they look great, they look happy. But what I learned by working directly with them is that they struggling. A lot of them, they don't have enough money. Sometimes they're struggling because they're trying to live something that they're not. They're struggling because they are trying to be something that they think others are expecting them to be. And so by learning, as myself being an influencer, I had to also teach them that, hey, I became an influencer by being myself, which means you can too. You just have to change the narrative. And I think especially for Christians, we always are told to be a certain type of way. We have to be careful what we say, and we can't show ourselves too much because people will begin to get too common with us. All of that stuff is, I think, built off of fear. And honestly, it's caused us to be very unrelatable as Christians. And so literally working with influencers has helped me and them to start to tear those down. Like, we can't be operating like that anymore. It looks fake, and then people honestly don't receive it as well.
I love that. I think you absolutely true, because even when I've been doing this podcast series, I'm learning so much as well from the different women that I'm talking to. And so sometimes how you show up in front of, the audience is very different than what's actually happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
So in your profession and working with influencers, what do you feel like, and I know you kind of named a few things, but what do you feel like is that one common internal struggle that you see kind of across the board that they all are kind of struggling with?
Insecurity, for sure.
Yeah.
And even more so because they are in front of other people, because they are publicly seen. It's like every flaw is magnified and repeated, right? So every time you see a viral post, you see it's 1 million hits, but that in their head is 1 million people that's dissecting them, 1 million comments, 1 million individuals that think something about that person that maybe is or is not correct, right? So now all of these things are playing to that one person. So that makes every insecurity magnified. And so what I learned is that we have to really be careful with people that we see who are publicly very happy. And then sometimes, again, never checking on them to see if they're actually happy in their regular life. I've dealt with that myself as being an influencer, where I would post one thing and I'm looking like, yes, life is great. And behind the scenes, I'm crying. After I post, I'm literally in tears because of how much trauma has happened to me. And so I think that's probably the number one thing that I've seen amongst all influencers.
That's so interesting. So what do you feel like, I mean, the dynamic of that, what kind of toll does that take on a person to continue to have to go through this roller coaster ride, in a sense, because you're trying to produce and say I'm okay, and I'm trying to show up in these curated feeds, and I'm doing all the things, and if you work with brands, you want your feed to look a certain way because it's really about marketing and different things of that nature. So there could come across this inability to be authentic at times. And so what do you feel like that roller coaster ride does to them as people?
Oh man, it makes them very unstable. I couldn't imagine doing this roller coaster without Jesus. Like, honestly, influencers that are not believers, I'm scared for them, because the enemy will take his toll. Like, not trying to get over spiritual, but this is literally a warfare thing that happens when you deal with people of influence, right? These mountains that we are being a part of are now literally coming against us because we are not equipped to deal with them. And so I think a lot of times the Christians, we have a little bit more armor to deal with some of the hits that come with being an influencer. But non-believers, man, they getting hit and not having anything to lean on. They're just being bombarded with thing after thing. That's why when I saw the young lady who was I think she was a beauty queen, and she jumped off of her building.
Chelsea.
What's her name again? Chelsea. Okay, I knew that was like, but she, honestly, I was not surprised, because I know when I see people publicly, that's not what they are privately. And that's something that I believe that God has really opened my eyes with when I became an influencer. All of my judgmental ways had to just like be chipped down. Like, he broke them down, because I used to be that person. I was an educator. I was super like, intellectual and very into just, seeing people on social media and thinking, oh my gosh, they're a joke. Why they need to get a life, right? That was me. And God had to literally chip me down to see past that, to show that, man, this is not just how they live. This is deeper. This is something that needs to be dealt with and helped. So that's what I'm here, honestly, to do, is to help people like that to get through it. Honestly, that's a part of my assignment.
So do you have to show up in that capacity a lot with the membership platform that you have?
Yeah, for sure. Honestly, the members that I have a part of BCI, a lot of them, we have relationships now. Like, I'm they're in my phone. Like, I can call them, they can call me when they need to. We've had influencers that have, gone through being evicted from their homes, and we've had to, as members, band together to help them, right? They never would publicly share all of this information, because again, you have to maintain your business, you have to maintain your persona for people to trust you. So where do you have a safe space to tell somebody like, yo, I need help?
Yeah,
right?
that's
You
true.
see,
That's
you
true.
have this big platform, but that's not the place all the time because you have to maintain a certain amount of discretion. So, within our community, people are able to connect with other influencers where they can find safety. Obviously, I can't connect with everybody,
Right.
but what I
Yeah.
like about community is that when you're in there, it's more than just me.
Yeah.
It's others that you can work
Yeah.
with. And so that's what really, I think, helps with our community.
I love that. So I know that you've spoken, publicly about a time in your life when you kind of struggle with depression and different things of that nature. And I'm sure that was a different time in life, but being an influencer and having the platform and working with other influencers and just having this, more of a front facing career, is there ever a time where that depression or those mental health struggles are ever triggered based on what you're doing now?
I would say that not to the same extent that I did when I was going through my battle with depression. It was one of the most horrifying times of my life. I
Yeah.
was going through a separation with my ex-husband we were doing well. And then just out of nowhere, things changed,
Yeah.
and that really took a toll on me because we had the perfect life and
Mm,
literally it just was all taken away within like a week. And
wow.
I just I was triggered. I was traumatized. I didn't know how to deal with it. And, I didn't know how to ask for help. So going through that gave me the coping mechanisms to deal with what I have now. So when I do start to feel depressed or angry or discouraged, I now don't keep it to myself. Back then, that Jackie would have kept it to herself, dealt with it in private, and it
Yeah.
wouldn't have been dealt with. Like I would have
Yeah.
just had it all built up, and it would have, caused for me to react how I did back then, where I felt like I was just ready to end it. I was done. Right. But
Mhm.
now I have people in place. I have a therapist that I can talk to when I need to. I have other influencer friends, right? When you
Yeah.
have people that are in the same boat with you and on the
Yeah.
same level as you, it
Mhm.
helps, and so that helps me as well to have people that I can talk to be like, yo, man, it's hard out here. Like,
Mhm.
what do you say in a tragic moment? Like, how do you
Yeah.
deal with people when they are like being rude on social media and in your comments? Like, that stuff is
Yeah.
triggering and hurtful. So,
Yeah.
I think now God has equipped me back then for the things that I would need where I'm at now.
That's awesome. So even though I know you're not necessarily facing those same things today, but are there times where, when you are discouraged or you are not necessarily in the best headspace that you have to put a happy face on, or do you not do that, just to show up online? How do you kind of go about being having to be in this front facing career, having the Black Christians influencers platforms and kind of having to show up in that capacity because you're leading, what do you do? How do you go about that?
Yeah, I'm a type of person where I wear my heart on my sleeve, so you usually can see when something's bothering me. It'll come out in a post, it'll come out in a comment. So I'm very, very difficult. It's very hard for me to not be transparent. I'll say that.
Okay.
Which is one of the best qualities that I have, and also the worst, because if I'm having a problem with you, it might
Yeah.
come out at some point. So that's probably something that I feel like personally I have been able to work on and understand the difference between transparency and translucence. Like
Yeah.
you don't
Mhm.
have to be translucent.
Yeah.
Transparency just means that you can show people but there's still a wall. There's still like a frame there. There's a film that kind of separates you, right? And
Yeah.
so I think for me, I've learned that, when I'm not in a good headspace, I just don't show up. So if
Okay.
there's times where you just see Jackie disappear for a while, she's probably not in a good headspace, right? I'd rather just disappear than be disingenuous. That's just me.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I love that. So you did mention that, there's this thing about being translucent and there's this thing about being transparent. And what I've noticed online sometimes with influencers is that they can overshare. So I know that there's this,
Mhm.
I don't want to say a movement, but there's almost this expectation of transparency or vulnerability, or because I'm a lifestyle influencer, or because, I show up online, that I'm supposed to express everything that I'm going through. And I think that some influencers actually kind of fall in that trap and they overshare, and it sometimes kind of bites them, in the end.
Yes.
And so what's your perspective on that, or your thoughts about oversharing online?
You need wisdom. You gotta ask God for wisdom. And I know people are like, that's no. I pray for wisdom. I remember I was listening to a teaching, I think it was my father, and he was asking God, like, if there's one thing you could ask God for, what would it be? And he said wisdom, because wisdom will lead you into everything else that you need to know. And so wisdom for me has been something I believe God has blessed me with. And it is something that I think is imperative for influencers to request God for. Because there is no way for every situation to have a handbook of what you should share, what you shouldn't share, when you should share it, when you shouldn't share it. It's just impossible to create such a thing. But with wisdom, you can be led to know when to do it, right? You can know, like, man, I'm upset with this girl. She just pissed me off. But God will literally stop you sometimes from having the words to put out there. You know, it just won't come out. Like, the leading of God has really led me when I created BCI. There were things sometimes that I wanted to post, and literally my phone would freeze up sometimes. God would be like, nope. And no. Not today. Girl, I promise you, I would be like, I'm about to go, and my phone would just die. I was like, I just had a full battery. What the heck? Like, it's literally that deep sometimes, where you just have to be led by the Spirit and know, like, if God is pushing you to do something, double check it, try it with the Spirit, like, make sure that it is not yourself just needing to get stuff off your chest, and it's going to serve a purpose. That's another way that I've learned now to do it, is that, is this going to serve a purpose? Who will it help? If it's not going to help anyone but myself to look good, then it's probably not the right time to share it.
Oh, so I love that.
That's a good way to know.
Yeah. What is the purpose? You know what I mean? Like, is this going to build the business? Is this going to, you know, what is the purpose of me sharing this stuff? That's awesome. So that brings me to my last question that I ask all the guests on this series. And from your perspective, what is the cost of relevancy and influence?
Oh, it's privacy. It's I would say in general, that's what you're giving up. You're giving up your privacy in a lot of instances, not just like publicly, but the more influence that you get, the less time you'll have to be by yourself. I'm an introvert, so it's very important for me to
me
be
too.
by myself. And I realize the more influence I get, the less time I have to myself, because I have to show up for other people. And when I spend so much time showing up for other people, I realize I still got a family that I got to show up for. So now the time where I may want to be sitting by myself, I need to spend that going to support my cousin and my niece who are still a part of my life, right? So I think a part of what you have to realize is that there are sacrifices that come with having influence and having some sort of notoriety. And usually it comes at the cost of your privacy. And if you're not willing to give up yourself, your space, your time, then you probably are going in the wrong direction. You may need to just head back the other way. True. Because it will cost you some things. But there are barriers. I believe that God is protecting you as well. So sometimes where you feel like you don't have enough, he'll make room for you to have space. Like sometimes literally there'll be a meeting and it'll be back-to-back meetings. The next thing I know, God will cancel one of them and just say, now you can have your space, Jackie. Just enjoy your time by yourself. Don't make no other plans. But again, I do think we have to be ready for what comes with it. A lot of us want it, but we're not ready for the sacrifice that comes after.
I love that. You want the influence, but you have to know the sacrifice that comes with it. Thank you, Jackie. It was so good speaking with you.
You too, for sure.